What happens when a CEO goes undercover at his own dealership, only to witness one of his employees humiliating a struggling buyer? What he does next will leave you speechless. The early morning sunlight spilled across Ethan Carter's desk, glinting off a sleek glass-encased photo of his first dealership. Back then, it was just a small lot on the corner of a dusty street, but it was his. Now, Carter Auto Group had grown into a chain of 15 dealerships spread across 3 states. The business was booming, but not without cracks forming beneath the surface. Ethan leaned back in his leather chair, scrolling through customer complaints on his laptop. Each review seemed worse than the last. Pushy salesman who tricked me into signing a terrible deal. I was humiliated when I asked for a lower payment option. They laughed when I told them I couldn't afford their down payment. Ethan clenched his fist. This wasn't how his business was supposed to run. He prided himself on fairness and customer-first values. Something had gone terribly wrong. His executives assured him it was just standard sales pressure. They claimed no rules were broken. But Ethan wasn't convinced. He needed to see for himself. A few days later, Ethan stood in front of his most problematic location, one of his largest dealerships. Dressed in faded jeans, scuffed sneakers, and a wrinkled flannel shirt, he barely recognized himself in the rearview mirror. The makeup artist had added subtle wrinkles to his face and grayed his dark hair. Thick glasses rested low on his nose, and a cheap watch dangled on his wrist. He looked like just another working man trying to survive. "Here we go," he muttered, stepping out of his car. The dealership lot stretched wide in front of him. Bright banners screamed, "No credit, no problem," in oversized letters. Salespeople huddled near the entrance, scanning potential customers like hawks searching for prey. A man in a sharp suit, tall, confident, and no older than 30, stood near the showroom entrance. His name tag read, Brad, Senior Sales Lead. Ethan made a mental note of him. Ethan kept his head down, wandering toward the used car section. He passed a young woman inspecting a sedan. She wore worn-out boots and a baggy sweatshirt. Her hands were trembling as she held a notepad filled with calculations. "Excuse me," a smooth voice cut in. It was Brad. "Can I help you with something today?" His smile was wide but empty. The young woman glanced up nervously. "Oh no, I'm not sure if I can afford anything here," she stammered. Brad's smile faded. "Well, if you're here just to waste time..." Ethan's eyebrows shot up. He lingered nearby, pretending to browse but listening closely. "I'm not wasting time," the woman said quietly. I need a car for work. My last one broke down and..." Yeah, Brad interrupted. "Look, these cars aren't cheap. Maybe you should try one of those buy here, pay here lots across town. They cater to people like you." The young woman's face flushed. Could I speak to someone about financing?" she asked. Brad chuckled dryly. "With your credit? Honey, you'd be lucky to finance a bicycle." He smirked. The woman's eyes welled up. She clutched her notebook and turned to leave. "Hey," Ethan called out, stepping forward. "That's no way to talk to a customer." Brad's smile returned, but now it carried a cold edge. "Oh yeah," Brad sneered. "And who are you, exactly?" "Someone who knows you're treating people like dirt," Ethan shot back. He turned to the woman. "Ma'am, I'm sure there's a reasonable financing option for you." She wiped her eyes. "I doubt it," she muttered. "I've been turned down everywhere." "I can help," Ethan insisted. Brad laughed. "Sure you can." He turned to the young woman. "Look, sweetheart, don't let this guy fill your head with ideas. Come back when you've got some real money." "I'm serious," Ethan cut in. "There's always a way." The woman gave a weak smile and nodded before walking toward the exit. Ethan watched her go, his anger simmering. "That's how you treat customers?" Ethan asked, voice low. Brad shrugged. "People like her just waste our time." "You mean people who need a fair deal?" "People who won't make me a commission," Brad said smugly. "This isn't a charity, old man." Ethan's fists clenched. He knew he couldn't reveal himself yet. He still needed to see more. With a forced smile, he turned back toward the lot. Over the next 2 hours, Ethan quietly observed the dealership's operations. He saw another salesman aggressively corner a customer into signing an overpriced deal. He overheard a finance officer casually explain how they slipped extra fees into contracts without disclosing them up front. Worse, he saw Brad grinning smugly while other salespeople laughed about how they squeezed a family into a loan they couldn't afford. This wasn't just one bad employee. This was systemic. His heart sank. Before he left, Ethan spotted the young woman from earlier sitting at a nearby bus stop, her head in her hands. He walked over. "I know you don't know me," Ethan said gently, "but I swear, if you give me one day, I'll make sure you get a fair deal." She wiped her eyes and looked at him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you deserve better," Ethan replied. "My name's Tom," he added, sticking to his alias. "I'll be back tomorrow." The woman nodded reluctantly, still unsure whether to trust him. As Ethan walked away, one thing was clear. Things at his dealership were far worse than he'd imagined, and tomorrow he'd start to fix it. The next morning, Ethan arrived early at the dealership. The air was crisp, the parking lot empty, except for a few employees trickling in. His mind replayed the previous day's humiliations. The young woman reduced to tears, the smug arrogance on Brad's face, and the manipulative tactics used to trap vulnerable customers. Today, Ethan would dig deeper, and he wouldn't hold back. Ethan entered the showroom just as Brad greeted a well-dressed man in his 30s. The customer looked confident, keys to a luxury sedan dangling from his hand. "Right this way, sir," Brad beamed. "We've got some excellent options in our premium line." Ethan smirked bitterly. Of course, Brad treated wealthier customers like royalty. Choosing not to linger, Ethan made his way toward the finance office. He spotted a woman in her 40s, sitting across from a sharp-looking finance officer named Kyle. The woman looked flustered, her checkbook clutched tightly in her hand. I thought the monthly payment was $320, she said nervously. Kyle shook, his head flashing a rehearsed smile. "Yeah, about that. Taxes, fees, warranty. It adds up. But hey," he said, lowering his voice like he was doing her a favor. "If you sign today, I can get you a lower interest rate." But I can't afford $480 a month," she whispered. I need to think about this." Kyle's smile vanished. "Look," he snapped, "if you leave now, this deal's gone. And good luck finding something cheaper. Cars are selling fast." The woman swallowed hard, her hand hovering over the pen. "Don't sign that," Ethan said firmly, stepping forward. Both Kyle and the woman looked up in surprise. "Excuse me," Kyle shot back. "She asked for time to think," Ethan said, keeping his voice calm. "That's her right." Kyle glared at him. "And you are someone who doesn't appreciate customers being pushed into bad deals." The woman stood quickly, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "Thank you," she murmured to Ethan before hurrying out the door. "Nice job," Kyle sneered. "You just cost her the best deal she was going to get." "Or maybe," Ethan said coldly, "I saved her from a mistake." He turned and walked away, ignoring Kyle's muttered curse. A short while later, Ethan spotted the young woman from the day before hesitantly walking through the entrance. Her name, he now knew, was Rachel. She wore the same worn-out boots and carried her notebook, her fingers gripping it tightly. Rachel didn't approach anyone this time. She just hovered near the used car section, unsure what to do. Before Ethan could reach her, Brad noticed her first. "You again?" Brad sneered, strolling over. "Didn't get the hint yesterday." Rachel shrank back. I just wanted to look all you want," Brad cut in. "But if you can't afford it, don't waste my time." "She's not wasting anyone's time," Ethan said sharply, stepping between them. Brad's face twisted into an exaggerated smile. Oh, look, it's the hero again. Ethan turned to Rachel. Come with me, he said, his voice softening. We'll find something that works. Rachel hesitated, then followed Ethan toward a row of modest used cars. Brad snorted. Have fun scraping the bottom of the barrel. While Ethan showed Rachel some cars, a heated argument broke out near the finance office. A man in a faded work shirt stood at the counter, his face red with frustration. I told you, the man barked at Kyle. I was promised a $250 payment. Now, it's almost $400. Kyle shrugged. Read the contract. You signed it. Because you rushed me. You didn't explain half of this. That's not my problem, Kyle said smugly. If you can't pay, better start walking. Ethan felt his blood boil. He watched as the man stormed out of the dealership, defeated. Kyle's arrogant grin lingered like a stain in the air. I'll be right back, Ethan told Rachel. He marched straight to Kyle's desk. That's how you treat customers? Ethan growled. Kyle's smile wavered. What's your problem, old man? My problem, Ethan shot back, is you cheating people. I've seen enough. Kyle smirked again. Hey, Brad, he called across the room. Looks like our new friend here thinks he's in charge. Brad strode over, arms crossed. You don't belong here, buddy. Why don't you run along before things get unpleasant? Is that a threat? Ethan asked, stepping closer. Brad chuckled darkly. If you make it one. Enough! A sharp voice rang out from the showroom. Rick, the dealership's floor manager, stormed over. His sharp suit and slicked back hair seemed to command the room. What's going on here? Rick demanded. This clown's been interrupting deals all morning, Brad said. He's driving off paying customers. Rick fixed Ethan with an icy stare. I don't know who you are, he said coldly, but you're done here. Get out. Fine, Ethan said quietly, but I'll be back. Not if security sees you first, Rick sneered. Ethan walked outside, his hands shaking. Not from fear, but from rage. This wasn't just one bad apple or two. The entire dealership had rotted from the inside out. He had seen enough. Tomorrow, Ethan wouldn't come back as Tom the customer. Tomorrow, he'd return as Ethan Carter, the CEO, and this dealership was about to change. The next morning, Ethan Carter arrived at the dealership without his disguise. He wore a crisp suit, his hair neatly combed back, and his sharp gaze carried a silent authority. This time, he wasn't here to observe. He was here to take control. The dealership was already busy when Ethan stepped inside. Customers browsed, employees hustled, and Brad stood near the showroom entrance, confidently steering a couple toward a luxury SUV. Ethan spotted Rachel in the corner. She was nervously looking over a sedan, clearly unsure if she should even be there. Ethan's eyes hardened. Time to fix this, he muttered. He walked straight to Brad. You remember me? Ethan asked. Brad turned, smirking. Oh, hey. Figured. You ran off after yesterday. Not quite. Ethan's voice was firm. Where's your manager? Rick's in his office, Brad said lazily. But unless you're buying something, I'd suggest... I'll take it from here, Ethan cut in. He turned and walked directly to Rick's office without another word. Inside, Rick was reviewing paperwork when Ethan pushed the door open without knocking. Rick glanced up, clearly irritated. Who are you, and what do you... Ethan Carter, Ethan interrupted. Owner of this dealership. Rick's eyes widened, his face turning pale. Wait, what? That's right, Ethan said coldly. And I know exactly what's been happening here. Ethan stepped back into the showroom, Rick stumbling out behind him. The room seemed to quiet as customers and employees began to notice Ethan's presence. Brad's smug grin faltered when he saw Rick's worried expression. Everyone, Ethan announced, his voice loud and commanding. My name is Ethan Carter. I own this dealership, and I've spent the past 2 days watching how this place actually operates. The room was still. Employees shifted nervously. I've seen customers pushed into overpriced deals. I've seen lies, manipulation, and arrogance, all designed to squeeze every dollar from hard-working people. His gaze zeroed in on Brad and Kyle. And the worst part? It's been encouraged. Rick stiffened. Mr. Carter, he started. I was just following company policy. No, Ethan cut in. You twisted company policy into something cruel. You encouraged your sales team to prey on vulnerable customers. That's not fair, Rick snapped. This is how dealerships make money. People can't afford cars without financing. We're just giving them options. Options? Ethan's voice rose. You bullied a man into a loan he couldn't afford yesterday. You humiliated a young woman because you assumed she was broke. That's not giving options. That's abuse. Rick's face flushed red. You're overreacting. No. Ethan's voice dropped to a cold calm. I'm cleaning house. He turned to Brad. You're fired. Brad's eyes widened. What? No, I close the most deals here. And how many of those deals crushed the customer? Ethan shot back. You've embarrassed, manipulated, and disrespected enough people. Get out, Brad sputtered, but Ethan's stare froze him in place. Silently, Brad grabbed his jacket and stormed out the door. Next, Ethan turned to Rick. You let this happen. You encouraged it. And for that, you're done. Rick's face went slack. You can't fire me, he stammered. I just did, Ethan said firmly. Collect your things. Rick turned without another word, his head low, and retreated toward his office. Restoring trust, the tension in the room lingered as Ethan faced the rest of the employees. Most stared at him in shock. Others avoided his gaze entirely. I'm not here to fire everyone, Ethan said. But things are going to change. He spotted Rachel standing near the back, still clutching her notebook. Rachel, Ethan called gently. Come here for a moment. Rachel hesitated, then stepped forward. This young woman was humiliated yesterday, Ethan announced. She came here, looking for help, and was treated like a burden. He turned to Rachel. That's not how we do things here. Not anymore. I just needed a car, Rachel said quietly. And you'll get one, Ethan promised. At a fair price, with honest terms. Rachel's lip trembled, but she smiled gratefully. Thank you. Ethan turned back to his employees. I want every customer treated with respect. No more tricks. No more pressure. We're going to earn people's trust back, one deal at a time. His gaze swept the room. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave now. No one moved. Good, Ethan said firmly. Now let's get to work. The air in the dealership still felt tense after the shocking events of the morning. Brad and Rick were gone, and whispers swirled among employees. Some seemed relieved, others worried. Ethan knew that trust wasn't going to be restored overnight, but he was determined to start. Restoring confidence, Ethan approached Rachel, who stood nervously by the sedan she had been eyeing the day before. Rachel, Ethan said, his tone softer now. Let's sit down and figure this out. Rachel bit her lip. I don't know if I can afford anything here. You'd be surprised, Ethan replied with a warm smile. Come with me. Inside the office, Ethan called over Kevin, a finance officer who had quietly kept his head down during the morning's chaos. Kevin, Ethan said, we're doing things differently now. I want Rachel to see exactly what she's paying. No surprises. Show her everything. Kevin nodded. Together they worked through options. Rachel nervously shared her budget, and Kevin patiently outlined fair financing options with reasonable terms. No pressure, no tricks. For the first time in weeks, Rachel felt like someone was actually listening. By the end, Rachel had found a reliable sedan within her budget. When she signed the paperwork, her hands were steady, and her smile genuine. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't think anyone would actually help me. You deserve it, Ethan said. And you're not the only one. That afternoon, Ethan gathered the remaining staff in the showroom. Employees stood quietly, some still unsure where they stood. "I know today's been chaotic," Ethan began. "But we're not finished yet." He turned to Lena, the young saleswoman, who had quietly warned him about the shady tactics earlier. "Lena," Ethan said, "you stood up for what's right when no one else did. Starting today, you're the new sales manager." Lena's eyes widened. "Wait, seriously?" "You earned it," Ethan said firmly, "because we need leaders who believe in honesty, not pressure tactics." Lena smiled nervously, but stood taller. "From now on," Ethan continued to the room, "this dealership is going to operate differently. No more hidden fees, no more deception. Customers will know exactly what they're signing before they drive off this lot." He paused, scanning their faces. "We're going to rebuild our reputation the right way, by treating people with respect." He could see the tension ease from some employees. Others exchanged hesitant glances, unsure if this new direction would last. Ethan knew he'd have to prove it. Later that evening, Ethan sat in his office, sorting through paperwork when his phone rang. "Hello? Mr. Carter?" "It's Mike," said a hesitant voice on the line. It was the man who had been humiliated by Brad on Ethan's first day undercover. "Mike, I'm glad you called," Ethan said, smiling. "I was actually hoping to reach you." I don't know if I should even bother," Mike said wearily. "I've been to 5 dealerships already. Nobody's willing to help." "This time will be different," Ethan promised. "Please, come back tomorrow. Let me make this right." Mike agreed, though his voice carried doubt. The next day, Mike returned, his face tired and wary. Lena greeted him warmly and walked him through several car options, carefully explaining prices and terms as they went. For the first time in weeks, Mike felt like someone was genuinely trying to help. By the end of the visit, Mike drove away in a reliable truck, one that met his budget and would get him to his construction job on time. As he left, he shook Ethan's hand firmly. "I'll tell everyone I know about this place," Mike promised. "Thank you for doing the right thing." In the following weeks, Ethan worked closely with Lena and Kevin to implement new training programs for the sales team. Employees were taught how to prioritize customer relationships over aggressive tactics. Incentives shifted from commission-driven goals to customer satisfaction. It wasn't easy. Some employees quit, unwilling to adjust to the new expectations, but those who stayed believed in the mission. And soon, word spread about the new Carter Auto Group. Customers returned, and with them came trust, something far more valuable than any sale. On a quiet morning, weeks later, Ethan stood outside the dealership and watched as Rachel pulled into the lot in her new car. She smiled and waved. Mike's truck rumbled past soon after. Ethan knew this was just the beginning, but the foundation was solid. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like his business was truly his again, built on the values he had believed in from the start.